just get a message from Long Beach meditation, like what is my topic? And Travis is usually the person who sends me that, and like months in advance. So, but I like this topic. It's and I called it Enchantment versus Disenchantment, and fading desire like dye from a cloth. Wash, rinse, repeat. So it's kind of a mouthful. And I thought maybe I'll just explain what this idea of some similes or metaphors that I find kind of entertaining. I'm just going to be honest. I find them, but entertaining in a way that help to penetrate learnings related to meditative practice, daily practice, kind of make it stick, the actual learning. And I'll just sort of have that be my introduction. It's really these similes that are from ancient teaching and how they even relate to modern science. A lot of scientists and people are so interested in the benefits of practice, whether it's like meditation or yoga. And I know have had really good teachers who have both interests. And some, I wanted to share the people who are scientists have interests in practice, very deep practice as well. And mostly what they're doing is validating the benefits. So the first word here that I used was enchantment, to enchant. So I'll just start with actually the word origin, etymology. And it comes from Latin, according to the etymology book. And the word enchant has two syllables, en and chant. And so perhaps, in English, the word chant can mean to sing, like some chanting. Could be some kind of spiritual, but in general, the idea that chant means to sing. And then en, the enchant is to inside. So something is singing inside. So the origin of the word is that there's like something singing inside, something enchanting. And then a definition so we're talking about ancient Latin, that's thousands of years ago, and the evolution of the word to today, the definition is to fill someone with great delight or charm. So there's something filling us with delight or charm. And so to me, that kind of connects with that singing inside. There's something that delight is inside, that charm. And I love the image of like there's something singing inside of me, to be enchanted. And then another definition is to put someone or something under a spell, like to bewitch. That's kind of like sounds a little bit magical. And there can be so many things that are enchanting in a positive way, like nature, and like awe, the awe of nature. That's enchanting, or a beautiful smell or a flower, or an experience can be enchanting and lovely and very, very, very positive. So something singing inside that's really lovely. And so just this other idea that something could be a little bit like a spell, like being enchanted by like a social media feed. There's some trigger, whatever it is, it's just I want to check my email, which is like a constant feed, or a Facebook feed, or Instagram feed, or the news feed. There's all these things that can become so enchanting that it's 3 hours later, and I meant to just check my email. The next thing I know, I just kind of got enchanted. There's something enchanting. So that's the other word. That's the other point of using this word enchantment, and it does relate a little bit to that spell, but I don't mean magic. There is something going on there. There's so much going on with being enchanted that there's neuroscientists who are hired by food companies to create snacks that we can't just eat one. Or the New York Times in 2013 did an incredible article about the food science behind a Dorito, the whole article. And they had food engineers and food scientists, so that that there's no something that's called a pleasure plateau, that there is no pleasure plateau. Because sometimes we eat stuff and it's like, okay, like chewing on gum, the flavor goes away, or having a certain amount of chips or something. There's a point where it's like, okay, I've had enough. So wouldn't it be great if we could create a product that there is no pleasure plateau? You just want to keep going and people will keep consuming and buying our product. And I think that's related to being enchanted. Like there's some people out there to have us be enchanted by products, including all the really smart, creative folks who are doing AI and have been tracking our interest as we shop or go on YouTube or some other kind of media, that it pops an ad so it knows what we like or don't like. And that's a lot of people trying to enchant us, enchant our awareness and direct our behavior. And so it's like something sings inside and we get lost, we get attached. And sometimes it's harmful and we know it. Like we'll wake up from it, just like when we drift in a meditation and we wake up, it's like, oh shit, it's like, oh, you're recording me. Oh shoot, it's like an hour later and I was supposed to do X, Y, and Z. So, we get enchanted and it's really human, but it's also to the point where this isn't natural. It's not always natural, to be so enchanted, but people have been enchanted for thousands of years. So to make my point that enchantment has some really positive qualities, it depends how we use the word, right? So for this conversation, I'm kind of leaning towards the enchantment of going to some kind of behavior or habit that's unwanted, that causes suffering. The great teachings of Buddhism, the Buddha is known for saying, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. And there's so much great teaching that we bring into pragmatic modern times that is about helping us to see things clearly and to make conscious choice, not be on autopilot, to move away from things that enchant us, that cause some kind of harm, and to even see that there's some harm in it. And that's really for us to decide. It wouldn't be for me, it's for each of us to feel into and to decide. So that enchantment, defining enchantment in that way, and just sort of continuing on to bridge this with this ancient word. And I just want to say, I only know a few ancient words from the time of the Buddha, which is Pali. It's really similar to Sanskrit, which is from India, and kind of coexisted at some point with Latin, ancient Latin, just as a side note. That this word is Raga, R-A-G-A in English, and it's kind of related to enchantment. And the definition in the Buddhist concept is to be attached to a sensory object, to be absorbed, or to be attached to something to the point like you're enchanted, become attached to it. Maybe if you've ever noticed when you meditate, you start to go into storytelling, we become attached to our story. And then we kind of metaphorically wake up and we can say, oh, I'm attached to the story. I can go back to the intention. My intention was the breath. So it's not like we're doing anything wrong here, but we did move away from our intention and we attached to the breath. And we can see that in everyday life, how we can attach our awareness to different things. So Raga, this is what I love this metaphor or this etymology, that there's etymology for this word too. That Raga, literally, the original meaning meant to color or to add a hue to something. Like, I'm an artist, I didn't mention that earlier, so maybe that's why these similes really speak to me. So it really meant to dye a cloth. So if there was like a white cloth, Raga means to dye, to color a cloth. And then from there, the word evolved a little bit to also include like a stain or a blemish. Like if you had a cloth that got a little bit dirty, and it evolved to also mean, in Buddhist concepts, it has to do with some kind of affliction or poison, referring to any form of greed, sensuality, lust, or desire. And this includes things that we become attached to, because we could become attached to, just like dye gets absorbed into a cloth, it gets attached. So there's that concept that this really rich dye becomes attached. And it's a deep dye. And so it may be an interesting literal meaning for what does it feel like also to be, enchanted. It's like this richly colored dye. And this can include cravings, just everyday cravings, or habits or behaviors that we have, and attitudes, because attitudes are like routines. And we might have negative attitudes that we just attach to all the time. Like, I hate taking out the garbage. And for as long as I can remember, I hate taking out the garbage. So I'm kind of attached to that attitude. And it is possible to like putting on glasses, like that attitude is like, these are, I hate taking out the garbage attitude. And is it possible to detach from that and even invite myself after 50 years to say, maybe I should think about when I go out and get curious and open my my mind to say, oh yeah, I can see flowers and birds, I can see my neighbors. This is an opportunity to take a few steps. And that this is something that I'm attached to. I'm attached to an attitude. And it is possible to change your attitude, to see things through a new lens. And sometimes it actually just takes waking up to the fact that we have these behaviors. So if I never even noticed, then perfectly possible I could go for my whole life and never really pay attention to that I hate taking out the garbage. But there may be a moment where I wake up to it. I wake up to it. And so I can maybe begin to disattach and start fading that habit, that attitude. So that takes me to this other word that relates to raga, which is the dye, that colored dye. And this is the only bit that I really know, I swear to you, about Pali, is that they have these words that you can attach like a little prefix or maybe even a suffix, I don't know, that makes it the opposite. So the opposite of dye or raga is this prefix is vi. So vi raga means the fading of the dye, to actually fade the dye, literally. And it evolved also into like a pair of jeans. You get the blue jeans, every time you put them in the wash, they fade a little bit. That would be viraga. But it actually evolved in the Buddhist texts that this means to disattach or to fade the dye, literally to fade the dye, but it means to begin to move away from greed and sensuality. But this sensuality, it's not saying that there's anything wrong with sensuality, but sensual desire, things that actually are harmful for us. Like, say, if I eat too much ice cream, like a material desire, something that might be harmful. But this idea of beginning to fade that dye or the craving or the attachment to something that we deem ourselves to be harmful, unbeneficial, creates sadness. So that viraga, or a fading of the dye. And so this idea to go beyond color, I'm just going to read this because this is part of the definition of viraga, to go beyond color, to be uncolored, and then to remain completely engaged in the world, yet uncolored by the world, which is kind of interesting. So is it possible to be in the world, to be uncolored by it? That seems a little far for me to follow, but it's more simple. It's this idea, for me, it's simple. This idea of, can we fade the dye, these strongly held habits that have been absorbed, we're attached to. So I like sharing those images. And this relates to enchantment. And then the viraga, opposite of enchantment, is disenchantment. And so there's a lot of practices that come from ancient teachings about disenchantment, of letting go and doing practices to release certain behaviors, certain things that cause suffering. That's a big part of what Buddhist teaching is about. And so bringing that into the practical world is something that interests me. And so there's teachings about waking up metaphorically to what is this behavior? And that, let's say there'll be three things I'll share, 3 steps. And the first one is that metaphorical waking up. Like, what is a habit that I may find that I'm engaged in? And that might be something like when I get upset, I want to eat ice cream because it makes me feel better. So that's maybe something I'll notice. It's like, oh, or I really start to notice that I'm a stress eater, that this unpleasantness, that I'm somebody who just drives stress eating. So my hunger is more emotional. I have a habit of emotional hunger as opposed to real, of course I get hungry when I'm physically hungry, but there might be this emotional hunger. I can actually start treating food as something like to make me feel better. And that's true of any habit. Like I'll go to I'm using myself, by the way, as an example, because I don't want to use anybody else here. So it's kind of like a general I. But this idea of using the internet, going to social media to the point where it's also unharmful because I had an emotional downer, and I just kind of want to avoid and move towards some substitution. And that these are things that might be habits that some of you have. So just noticing. And really noticing in itself is changing relationship with the habit, because we're no longer lost in it. It's like we actually see it. It's like a really wonderful thing. But we could also see it for the rest of our lives, and then that could actually be very unpleasant. So the second step is to really exploring, like, what do I get from this? This is something that is just as simple as asking, what do I get from this? Getting really curious. But a key thing with most practices that we do is not thinking, it's feeling. And so it does help to use words. And that's why I liked using these similes, like singing inside or the colored dye, because they're kind of more beyond words. They're more about experiential. So to ask oneself, what do I get from this behavior? So I'll just use one, playing a word game for way too long, or something that kills my time. And what do I really get from this? And then feeling into the body, like it might be a procrastination habit. And it can feel bad, like what happened. So there's this idea of weighing cost-benefit analysis of this unwanted behavior. What do I really get from this? And then feeling into it. Is it harmful or beneficial? Is it like bringing me long-term happiness or some kind of unhappiness? Is it causing harm or is it causing benefit? And not just now, but can I also reflect on, like, what did I get from this when I did it last time? What am I getting from it now, and what will it cause in the future? Like if I don't get in the car and drive to Long Beach Meditation to be on time because I'm playing a word game, this kind of habit, just really, really, really being honest and feeling into what's not so good about it. What is the downside? And that sounds like a drag, but the idea is to be honest, and that the science part that I want to share is, like, I'm a colleague and I've been a longtime student of Dr. Judd Brewer, who's a neuroscientist and addiction psychiatrist. And he studied these kind of patterns and behaviors in his work for over 20 years. And so this idea of really checking into what do I get from this, and knowing that each habit, they believe something that they can really measure is that almost every behavior has what they call a reward value, or else we wouldn't do it. If there's nothing somewhat rewarding, we wouldn't return to it. So this idea of each behavior has a reward is like how much you like one ice cream flavor over another. Like, one is more rewarding, or which social media do you like over the other, or are doing all those habits a lot more rewarding than taking out the garbage? Well, taking out the garbage has a pretty low reward level, but these other things have a high reward level, but they're harmful. So how can we lower that reward level? And it's by this inquiry. Each time there's a bit of a data point, and it's a practice. That's why it's a practice. It's a repetition. The same way we learn to tie our shoes or to do a dance or do a sport, we learn by repetition. And so this repeated practice of what do I get from this, and really feeling the downside. Like I said, it doesn't sound pleasant, but it's really facing, going into the challenge zone. And each time, in theory, it can lower the reward value a little bit at a time. And then when feeling into that, instead of reaching for the ice cream or the cell phone, and then the next step, there's the third step, is to be kind, to really be kind and curious. And this is a moment to just do like a breath practice, to know that within ourselves, we can be self-compassionate. There's a reward of being kind to ourselves. So it can be doing a practice where we do a metta practice. For those who are new to meditation, this is one where we're self-compassionate, repeating the phrases, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I care for myself joyfully. And feeling caring, you can let go of the words, just feeling the caring, which is like an inner wellspring that lives inside. So it's like sprinkling on caring, curiosity. So the third step is maybe just doing a few minutes of taking a breath, stopping, taking a breath. There's an acronym, stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed. So that's like the third step, is just to have a moment of self-care. And this is something I do every day quite a bit, is to do these very short contemplations. And it is a way to begin to fade the die. So it's like short practices many times, that the strongly colored dye, like going through the wash, it's like washing, rinsing, and repeating. And this relates to, in theory, how we learn, reward-based learning, that even like a sea snail that's got 20,000 neurons, when there's something toxic in the water, knows to move away from what doesn't feel good or what's toxic, and then move to fresh water or for nourishment. And that this is an impulse that we have too. And so we might move from that unpleasant habit to this more nourishing habit that we can provide for ourselves by caring for ourselves, by maybe simply just looking at what is my need. Is there maybe some other need here? So that third step is to also just move away from that behavior, that desire, that craving, and to explore, what do I need as opposed to what do I want? And it could also, the idea of, we can find this within ourselves, some inner wellspring of self-care. And it takes a lot of self-contemplation and facing truth about our own behavior. And that's why self-compassion and self-care are so important. And it's very possible that caring is really the basis of so much of meditative practice, and following some kind of journey of diminishing our unsatisfactorinesses and our sufferings, and something which is a path worth following. And so, something to explore, something I wanted to share, something I really liked and hope that it benefited you today. This idea of enchantment, is there something singing inside? And can we disenchant? That this is a practice of disenchantment. What do I get from this? Can I feel into my own self-kindness and self-care, and know that perhaps loving kindness is a much sweeter intrinsic reward than the sugar-filled ice cream.